Today we're going to talk about essential oils and affirmations and how they work to kickstart where you're feeling possibly sluggish, let's say, and why they work. Basically, to sum it up, an affirmation is a lie you tell yourself to undo another lie you told yourself. At the end of the day, that's how I sum it up. So we go through life believing things about ourselves, and most of these personality traits we assign ourselves are things we've developed over time as coping mechanisms, but now we confuse that as integral parts of our personality. And although some of those things might be positive, others negative, and have, toxic effects on our life, and we resign ourselves to that having to be the way it is because that's the way we are. And what has happened in that case is your brain has actually developed synapses or brain patterns through repetition. And through repetition, you started to believe the lie, right? This coping mechanism, because if you knew this was just a coping mechanism, when you didn't need it anymore, or you realized it was actually having a negative, it may have served you here, but now it's having a negative impact here, you could just put the armor down. But when you tell yourself, this is who I am, there's no room for improvement. There's no room for change. So what affirmations do is they make you believe something else, the opposite of the lie. But because at the time you're going through the limitation, the negative impact of what your lie to yourself was, that's true right now because that's what you see. The affirmation is the opposite message, which feels very untrue compared to what you're actually living. So that's why I call it the lie that undoes the lie. You know how when you're talking about abusive relationships, and they say, well, even if you have strong self-esteem and whatever, if someone tells you every single day that you're worthless or you're ugly, you're going to start to believe it. We are okay to see that theory from the lens of domestic abuse, let's say. But when we look at it with the relationship we have with ourselves, right? We don't often see how abusive we really are to ourselves. And if you don't realize the damage you've done by putting these little identity boxes on yourself, then you can't undo the damage it's causing in your life. But sometimes we reach these beautiful, blissful moments where we're acutely aware of how we've hurt ourselves and acutely aware of how this behavior was just an armor. It's not really your personality, which means right at that moment, you have the impetus for change. But patterns are very powerful. They're very powerful. So although you may have these moments of illumination, if you don't actively cultivate that new energy, those old patterns will kick in and talk you out of improvement. So what affirmations do is they cut the record. The skipping record, they stop it. Affirmations cut the negative spiral so that you can then take that second to catch yourself and get yourself to a new understanding. And when you include something like essential oils, the reason that's powerful is that your limbic system, which is triggered by your sense of smell, is also your emotional filing cabinet. And anytime there's an emotion attached to a thing, it's doubly powerful. So for example, if you believe that you're ugly, and that one time someone rejected you saying that you were ugly, and that absolutely broke your heart, you are going to be very attached to that trigger emotion. So whenever you approach a new relationship or even dating or whatever, you will have such a strong remembrance of that emotion that it could keep you from finding the person of your dreams because you don't even let yourself try. So what essential oils do is their molecules are so small they can cross the blood-brain barrier into your limbic system and help clear that emotional baggage. So you can then start to use affirmations to tell yourself a different story while there's a clearing going on. When people do certain psychedelics, they've done tests on them where they've done brain scans while they were on psychedelics. And there's some people that have a psychedelic experience that fundamentally changes them forever. where they have some illumination. So for example, with lysergic acid, when that was invented, it was first used in clinical trials to treat depression. Not depression, alcoholism, sorry. And Hoffman, who was the scientist that studied it, would say that while they were under the influence of this hallucinogenic, they would suddenly realize why they were an alcoholic, and they had an acute awareness of what that was doing to the people around them. And it was such an intense illumination that they remained sober long years after that psychedelic experience. So when they've done tests on people's brains while they're on these psychedelics, it's because temporarily the synapse stops. That pattern, all those electrical pulses that have been wiring these horrible paths in your head of negativity are suspended. And in that 12-hour period, they were able to replace it with new illumination. So essential oils has the exact same effect. Now, frankincense was actually proven to be a psychedelic substance. It had psychoactive effects. So essential oils, like I said, because they cross your blood-brain barrier, through your limbic system, through your sense of smell, they're one of the most powerful allies when you're starting to clear out that old baggage. And what happens when you convince yourself of a different story, which is what affirmations do to your subconscious. You know, when you're unemployed and you're saying, I love my new job, because that the affirmation has to undo. We're going to talk about how to create affirmations, but in that moment where you're lying to yourself about how much you love this new job that you don't really have in real life, it sounds ludicrous, but it is washing your subconscious. I want you to really get that image, that those words are washing your subconscious, and the essential oil you're using with it is washing the limbic system of all the heartbreak and anguish and anxiety that comes, and the memories of all the times you weren't employed, all the times you had bad luck, you lost the dream job, all those things that you couldn't find a job. You're going to erase all of that in that moment. And then throughout the day, you can use these to reaffirm throughout the day in a very subtle way. So if that morning you've done affirmations, and now you're in the afternoon and you're feeling those thinky thoughts, is what I take classes with Sri Richard and Sri Namaste Moore, and they call them thinky thoughts. When those thinky thoughts start to come in, I don't have time to sit there and chant affirmations, you know what I mean? I'm in a meeting, let's say, or whatever. But what I can do is this. It's very simple, very subtle. Go to the bathroom real quick, go in the hallway, and you're back in the conversation. And that will remind you. So this is Field. Field is an oil from Young Living that I've been using for 5 years as an expansion oil. So every time I need new opportunities, I need that break, I need that idea, I run to Field. And because I've been doing it for so long, I've had big wins. I've had big wins. Not necessarily because of the oil, because I'm damn good at what I do. So I've had some huge wins, but Field was part of that process, because before I had the win, I had the lack, right? Otherwise I wouldn't have sought that opportunity. So I would be in a moment of anxiety, whatever, I'd use Field. I would imagine how it would feel to have a solution, even if I didn't know what that solution could possibly be, what it would feel like if this was suddenly solved. And as I would go, hardly ever does it fall out of the sky, but I'd have the idea that would at least get me moving in the right direction. And sometimes those negatives turned into the best thing you could imagine for my career. So I've had a few wins in my belt while this was part of the process, and big ones. So now when I'm in a moment of anxiety and I pull out Field, and I know that my olfactory system is a great memory trigger, when I'm doing this, now I'm remembering win after win after win after win. Because when you are looking at something new and you've had failures in the past, tell me that doesn't scare the shit out of you. I've already failed at this. Last time I did this, I got my heart broken. Right? How many times do you do that to yourself? Well, when you start to create these new patterns over years, because in my case, it's been almost half a decade I've been in Young Living, or more, I think, that now you've had win after win after win. When you're looking back, you're only seeing wins, successes, joys. So now your risk tolerance suddenly goes up, and your feeling of things are gonna be okay because they always tend to work out. Now that I'm in my 40s, mid 40s, I don't panic like I used to. In my 20s, my whole world would stop when something didn't work out and I couldn't get out of bed and whatever. And now I just wait for the solution because there's always a solution. And because I know there's always a solution, I find the solution if I have to create it my damn self, you know? You know what I mean? And field gets me in that mindset and reminds me of I've had bigger wins and bigger problems than what I'm facing today. So let's just get her done. And field does that for me. So when you start to create these patterns of affirmations with oils, that will trigger the emotions, whatever, before you even fix the problem. So how do you do an affirmation? So affirmations are said in the present tense, in the affirmative. Okay, so for example, and focus on the end game. So let's say that your big thing is debt, right? That's something a lot of people struggle with. So let's say your big thing is debt. I wish I was debt free. I want to be debt free. That's what you first think you should say. But want implies that you don't have it. I'm going to be debt free in the future means it's in the future, not right now, right? So you want to say stuff like, now, what I'm about to say is still not correct, but let's improve it a little bit, because I am is a very powerful statement. I am debt free. But now, because you're talking about debt, you're still talking about being in debt in the present, right? Which means you're always going to be in the situation of needing to ask to be debt free. You may find the solution, but then you'll have the same problem. You'll pay off your credit card and then have an unexpected bill. You know what I mean? So we don't want to be in that energy. So if you're not wanting to have debt, then why are we even talking about it in an affirmation? But if you were wealthy, if you were generating amazing income, if you have more than you need, you know what I mean, then suddenly, obviously you don't have debt, or you wouldn't have more than you need. Get what I'm saying? So that would be, I have more than I need now. I am enjoying success and abundance now. They're very powerful. So I am, and now, and positive. Don't even think about what you don't want. And you can apply this to everything. Everything. And if you can attach a past memory of where something similar worked out, strong. And if you could remember how amazing you felt when things worked out, hang on to that feeling, because it's not the vision of the solution that's magic, which is really convenient because sometimes you can't see the solution. So it's a good thing you don't need to, right? What you need is to feel it. The magic is in the emotion that vision or that idea elicits in you. So as long as you can tap into how it would feel to have a solution, you're golden. And now you attach whatever oil works for you, and now you're doing repetition, because you're doing this in layers, and you're actually physically getting these molecules in your body. When you're putting it topically, besides what it's doing for your olfactory system, it's going through your bloodstream and circulating your bloodstream, which is why it's really important that if you're going to use essential oils with affirmations, you use a true oil, because especially in Canada with labeling laws, as long as I think it's like 8% or something ridiculous is essential oil in the bottle, they can fill it with whatever else they want and still call it, 100% essential oil. So get one that's completely full of real essential oil, because you want those molecules going through you. And yeah. So affirmations, incredibly powerful to undo the lies we've told ourselves. And you say it on repeat, sometimes in the beginning 100 times a day, anytime you're having a moment, anytime, you have these little mantras, to have them as mantras. And you're going to see that eventually that new story becomes the true story. If you want to know how that works, like a visual of how that could impact your life, have you ever seen the movie I Feel Pretty with Amy Schumer? So in the movie, she feels like she's awkward, and she doesn't think she's very pretty. So she walks through the world kind of feeling like a geek and shoved in obscurity, and her job never goes anywhere, and nothing ever happens for her. She can't meet the guy, you know what I mean? And she just... the whole beginning of the movie is her disparaging herself, and it's not in an exaggerated way. I know people like that character, you know what I mean, that walk through the world with that energy. And in the dream, in the movie, she falls, hits her head, wakes up concussed, believing she's beautiful, even though nothing about her has changed physically. She feels like she's transformed and she's a new person. And as a result, she walks through the world differently, dresses differently, talks differently, and, all this exuberance and confidence finds her a guy, gets her the dream job, all of these wonderful things. So, it's just that very belief about herself that changed everything. So instead of abusing yourself, right, by telling yourself all these horrible things about yourself, even if you don't believe them at the time, even if they sound ludicrous, because believe me, when it will sound ludicrous in the beginning when you're doing affirmations, right? As that starts to sink into your subconscious and takes root, it will start to blossom in your life. You will start to respond to things differently. You will start to treat people differently. You will treat yourself differently. And as a result of that, your behavior changes, and new behaviors get you different outcomes. So you're going to start to see change. So some tricks: get your affirmation set. So think about all the stuff where you're having resistance right now and write your affirmation in the present tense, in the affirmative. I am XYZ. Get your list. And when you start doing affirmations, they're this long. You know what I mean? But then you're going to come to learn that, 3/4 of your problems are because of one thing you do or one flaw or whatever. So you'll be able to condense that into something like a phrase that's a mantra that's easy to memorize and that you can do on repeat. The most powerful time to try to hypnotize yourself, literally, is what you're doing, is right when you're waking up in the morning, but while you're still half asleep. So not after you've got up and had a coffee. I'm talking about when you're still groggy and in bed. And then the same when you're going to sleep. Sometimes I'll record it. If it's something that's really deep-seated I'm dealing with, I'll record it, or I'll find a sleep hypnosis that deals with this, and I'll listen to it when I wake up in the morning, and then I'll have one that I listen to when I go to bed that is incredibly powerful. But otherwise, just memorize your little phrase. Pick your oil that to you resonates with whatever it is that you're trying to create. And every morning, every night, and any time during the day where the thinky thoughts are coming, you apply the oil somewhere, anywhere, in a diffuser, whatever. But I always like getting some topically so that it's going through my physical system as well as my olfactory system. And give yourself a little sniff. Repeat your mantra maybe 5 or 6 times. Another thing that you could do is, in the moment, this is my process. So I'm panicking right now, right? So as soon as I start to panic, I stop everything, and I literally say, yeah, stop. And I'll grab an oil. It's the first thing I grab, and as I'm sniffing, I start to say, okay, what are 5 things in the moment right now I'm grateful for, even if it's unrelated to this thing? Bing, bang, boom. So already the reframe starts. Then this thing is horrible, but what is the best solution that could happen? And what would it feel like if that solution suddenly landed in my lap? And if I don't know what the solution is, imagine my surprise when I find one. So what's that emotion going to be like? Oh, hang on to that. I hang on to that. I know then I'm just going to have to find the thing that makes me feel that, because that's what I want to feel. And then you start the affirmations about why you, of all people, will be able to pull this off. Because you always do. You know what I mean? And then you'll start to remember all the other times you had wins for problems that were bigger than this. And that's your routine. And sometimes, like I said, you'll have days you'll have to do this every 5 minutes. You know what I mean? But it will get you through. Because the problem is that if you let the thinky thoughts take root and get through into you, it will sabotage your next moves. People that are afraid, that are panicking, that are in a really bad place are dangerous in business because they make unwise decisions. They make rash decisions. They make mistakes. They've even done studies for people that have been in situations where some people die and some survive. And they studied the difference between those that die and those that don't. And the ones that don't is because they didn't panic. And because they didn't panic, they were aware and looking for the place to survive, where to get the air, whatever. People that were just panicking died. That is a survival thing, but imagine if you could apply that to life. Imagine if every time the shit hit the fan, you didn't get so bowled over you couldn't get out of bed. You didn't panic so bad that you couldn't function or couldn't eat or couldn't whatever. Imagine if your survival instinct was automatically solution oriented. How do we fix this? You become a solution oriented person instead of a problem oriented person. So many times, even in my industry is going through literal collapse right now. And my company is still quite strong in the face of all of that. And it's because while everybody else is complaining and whining and whatever, I'm pivoting my business model to, embrace the change. And so you can apply that to everything in your life. And affirmations will get you through it. When I was going through major calamity just a few years ago, when my relationship pulverized and the fallout from that, and, affirmations is what got me through it. And even sometimes my mantra, although it's supposed to be present, was future focused. By spring, this will be over. I just got to make it to spring. I just got to make it to spring. I'm going to make it to spring. Sometimes it has to be future focused because right now it's really that bad. you know, but again, even in that situation, the affirmation gets you through it. So affirmations and essential oils, incredibly powerful. And if you're interested in knowing more about that, I will have my link posted. Have a great day.